all of that, and I saw that the major challenge is monopolistic nature of this sector. So now I see my task as demonopolizing the market. You will understand that there are certain natural monopolies, because there are mains that can only be supported by monopolistic companies. There is the third energy package in Europe that provides very clear rules for reforming the energy sector, including oil and gas sectors, that in the future will incentivize competition and ensure adequate price of end prices of gas, oil, electricity, etc. or heat energy. So of course we can speak about hot water supplies, sewerage, etc., but our ultimate goal is to provide high quality services for good prices to the consumers. Hence our first task to improve competition in this market. You've heard me speaking about fighting large hyperstructures or superstructures, for example, Укргазвидобування. I do not fight them actually, or Naftogaz, or say a DTAC in electricity generation, or several groups in electricity distribution. So when I say that I'm trying to reform those subsectors, I'm speaking about introducing clear, understandable, and fair rules that they would be playing by. Clear cost of their production, which is easy to calculate. As soon as they already cooperate, we can do that. Understandable is that the regulator and the ministry should also cooperate. On the other hand, we all understand that those companies would not work well unless they get adequate compensation for their effort and for their return on their investment. So all of the rules should be clear and driven by economic processes. That's what they've already managed to achieve in the European market. Earlier this week, the Cabinet of Ministers gave its approval to the draft law on the market of natural gas. It will be the foundation for reforming oil and gas sector for the years to come. It will form clear rules. It will reform Naftogaz as a legal entity with several clearly established functions like generation, transportation, etc., upstream and downstream. This is a document that was drafted over 2 months. It's 80 or 90 pages long. It was endorsed by the European Economic Community. Representatives of the Secretariat came to Ukraine, and they voiced that at the Cabinet of Ministers session. The World Bank consultants also approved of it. So that's not only work between the Naftogaz NKRE and the Cabinet of Ministers or else our ministry. We work with local distribution systems and companies because the draft law will regulate their activities, pricing, functions of all the subsectors. So this document has been approved and it will be submitted to the Rada for adoption. I understand there would be a lot of criticism because it is how we are trying to influence huge monsters of companies who are used to existing rules. And when some people say that we don't do anything or that we don't wrong things, I understand that they have a right to say so. I understand that 90% of the information that is circulated around is a result of lobbyism on somebody's part. So, I understand this lobbyism takes place when somebody is not interested in changes. And understand that all of the players in the field would know who and why does that. So you should also remember about the situation, the war underway, and a need to reform all areas of the energy sector. Again, this is a huge, untransparent, non-transparent sector, and the reforms are long due here. I do agree that there are a lot of problems, for example, with Укргазвидобування that conducts auctions for liquefied gas, and there are a lot of questions relating to the pricing there, to the scopes of gas or volumes of gas sold at subsidized prices. So we are trying to introduce more transparent rules here. To make auctions accessible to all so that the pricing is guided by the market rules. The same pertains to the oil market. You might have followed the discount rate of 15% with very poor or questionable qualities. Some say the quality is better or worse than the European ones. There is a lot of argument going around, but you will understand that the 15% of difference or incremental price was not fair, and we are trying to change the situation. Of course, the more challenges we look at, the more demanding the task will be. And every day we have to work a lot to address all of those challenges. That's what we are doing today and what we've already done. I can give you certain statistics to illustrate what we've achieved. For example, by introducing more transparent auction rules for liquefied gas, we release some free money that goes to the state-owned enterprises who produce this liquefied gas. The question is, to what extent the efficiency will be ensured by those state-owned enterprises? I don't know, but if this money stays with the company and is managed properly, then it can be used. I mean, this money can be used to increase production. So this can change the situation with power supplies to Ukraine. For example, our gas supplies are about 1 trillion cubic meters, and we have the reserves for 30 years, for example, and we have to increase the production rather than pay somebody else to supply a gas. So the money will remain in the country and it will create new jobs. Companies will pay taxes and the product will be consumed internally. So, and then there would be no need to import gas for internal consumption. I understand that the current rates at 55% of gas production rates with the depth of under 5,000 meters is too high. We understand it. We conducted research and survey of the existing rates elsewhere. I won't tell you about our specific proposals that we made to the Cabinet of Ministers, but the decisions made with a due regard to the current situations managed to convince the Cabinet of Ministers that it is a reasonable product. But if we need to revise those rates, I will look into the available research very attentively and try to see better ways to regulate it. I understand that this rate impacts the investment activity. There are different ways to address these situations with the minimum adverse impact on the state budget. So we are at the very beginning of a very interesting and challenging process that will entail changes to the state budget. We have been doing a lot in the area of coal mining. 35% of all mines are loss-making. The cost of coal is 1,000, with 50,000 employees. That's 3 to 4 or even more times as big as we need, or as much as we need to perform the functions of production properly. This issue hasn't been addressed for quite a while, for 23 years, if you wish. And we didn't close up many coal mines. I propose that we should close down some mines which are exhausted with very difficult geophysical and geographical conditions, with very big depths, with lots of water in the mines and methane. So with very difficult geological conditions. It's hazardous and it is not economically efficient to have them. So salaries exceed actually the cost of coal. So perhaps those miners should be supported and subsidized via the Ministry of Social Policy and Labor. So they should be retrained and obtain new occupations. We've got such programs, and the Ministry of Social Policy contributes to it a lot. So these are all challenges, and we understand that people come by hundreds and protest against their lack of work, lack of livelihood. On the other hand, these processes might be stimulated artificially because there are some people who profited from those loss-making mines. They bought equipment at higher prices than the market ones. So the competent authorities should investigate all these cases. And we understand that there are a lot of vested interest in keeping the status quo. Once somebody initiates certain transformations or changes, they resist, and they've got enough resources to resist. They can spend a lot of money on television programs, on bringing people to Kiev and instigate demonstrations and protests, etc., etc. So we've developed a special program to address this issue. We understand how we can do it. But the decisions will be tough because people will lose jobs. We understand that their families will suffer, and that is very unpopular. But in order to cure the body, you sometimes have to endure pain. And now I work as a surgeon, if you wish, cutting some wounds or even parts of the body. In electricity subsector, there is a lot of challenges as well. We hear a lot of complaints from the manufacturers that the cost of electricity is too high. We understand why it is so. The manufacturers pay part of the prices that the population does not pay, being subsidized by the state budget. We understand that there are very cheap producers like Energoatom, which has the tariff of 32 kopecks, and there is Ukrhydro that provides for electric power plants, and the tariff there is 36 kopecks, but the end consumer pays 23 kopecks before VAT. So many people say it's not fair because any changes of tariffs would be very demanding and actually punishing for the population. But now we spend a lot of money for defense, and we understand that the state budget is too limited to subsidize everyone, including 30% of people who can afford paying the cost of electricity. The average check, if we come to think of it, the bill for electricity is about 60 hryvnias per month. So we also have to take inflation and devaluation of the national currency into account. So the price should be adjusted accordingly to be fairer to the producers of electricity. So we are discussing these issues with IMF. They say we support you with money, but you waste the money. We don't use or spend it efficiently because the population does not pay the market price tariffs. And if there are two prices, there would be people who subsidize it, those who can abuse this opportunity. Moreover, there are a lot of cases when, for example, heating is used inefficiently. Just when people heat houses when nobody resides, for example. I'm not saying that we should plant a European experience here in Ukraine 100%, in 100% of cases, but we should be very efficient, energy efficient, and we would do everything to save and not to waste. And before I suggest that NERC should raise tariffs, I should analyze whether the price is objective or tariff is objective. On the other hand, there's the cost of Ukrainian gas. And a lot of discussions are underway about the price of Ukrainian gas, of domestically produced gas. Once you take into account all the expenses, operational expenses, and invest into the development, into prospecting, into production, then you will understand that the market price should be higher than 300 hryvnias. That can be easily proven. So these are the issues that we are trying to address. You will understand that we've got a lot of immediate tasks at hand, and you will understand that we meet resistance from time to time. But I'm sure that a lot can be done to improve the situation. Now for electricity. You see, as matters stand today, we haven't had any problems with electricity cuts throughout Ukrainian territory, but for the area of military action. On the other hand, we understand that we've failed to bring in more coal because it is situated there in the territory where logistics does not operate, where they blast railway all the time. In Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, state-owned mines have more than 3 million tons of coal. That would be quite enough for us to fill in the gap in the and satisfy the need for this heating season. And it is much cheaper than the coal of Southern African make, Kazakhstan, Australia's, or Russian make. We've analyzed all the options for imports, and we understand that we will have to import coals because we cannot bring it to the station. And given the latest changes in the cost of coal, since the oil prices have gone down, the coal prices have also reduced. But you should take into account the logistics, and the latest offer was $90 CIF. And then the exchange rate has changed. Of course, we would like to buy dollars at the NBU rate, but in fact, we cannot possibly do it. So dollar is now calculated as costing 20 hryvnias, and if you get the offer of $70 is 340, which is much higher than the G coal produced by Ukrainian coal mines in Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts. Imported coal helped us to support the system operating, to maintain it operating, and to avoid numerous electricity cuts. Over the last month, we've also managed to stop smoldering coal, and we have started to accumulate it at storehouses. So no incineration is taking place today. No burning is taking place today. So it was a tough political decision, but economically it was well-grounded and sound. What the alternative might look like is that we would have to buy more coal abroad, bring it, say, from South Africa or from Australia by sea, which will make it even more expensive, $90 plus per ton. And that would affect the cost of electricity, causing additional tensions in the market. Another option was to use gas. Gas was not burned either, In January, we managed to save up to 800 million cubic meters. But for this imported electricity, whereas the electricity tariffs at 1.6 hryvnias, the balance at the electricity market would have been totally different, and there would be a huge deficit that should have been covered by somebody. The situation in the market is tough. Every month we produce 700 million to 100 billion in the occupied areas, and nobody pays for this electricity. We don't know whether it will ever be paid for. Non-payment by the consumers creates additional tension in the market, depriving us of the opportunity to pay for the twelves and for coal. We can't pay the producers, then we have to raise tariffs. And eventually, tariffs have to be paid by somebody. It's easy to say we should make our stake on manufacturing, but up to or even more than 50% of the producers or manufacturers that have to cover the cost of power supplies. These are very difficult tasks, I should admit. I think I tried to tell you about the topics that we are currently addressing. The situation is strange. You are asking targeted questions rather than strategic ones. Some that you can challenge me with. And once I finish talking for the record, you come to me with certain strategic things about our relations with Russia in terms of the summer package of gas, etc. I've got wonderful answers to all those questions, but you do not ask them for the record when the TV cameras are on. I'm ready to come to you even more frequently, but I'm too busy, and I would like to ask you to the ministry, say, at weekends, on Sundays or Saturdays, and I would be showing you what we do and report on progress and steps made over a week or two. I'm open for communication. I'm ready to explain things to you. Understand there is a need. So don't perceive me as the one who hates tough questions, because there are always adequate answers to all questions. So questions, please. Ukrainian news. Targeted question anyway, minor question. Are you planning to ban Укрнафта and Укрнафтогазовидобування to choose their own commodity exchange? Are you planning to attend Укрнафта auction? Yeah, we are having a meeting at 7 p.m. The auction committee is meeting to see how many bids we have. And the minimum price has been already formed. Tonight, we will understand whether it takes place at all tomorrow. The situation's very tricky there. We've managed to cancel 15% of the difference in the price. and there are certain additions or amendments to the resolution on the commodity exchange, on the auction procedures, etc. We will be revising those, but it was necessary to kick off the process, and next week we are trying to amend resolutions by the Cabinet of Ministers. Now, state-owned enterprises choose the commodity exchange to their liking, and you said that you would be doing that, which was not a popular step. Rules should be understandable and clear, and they should stimulate competition in trades. Alvarez Abramovich's economic minister also upholds the same principles. We share the same principles of free competition, and it's a matter of time to introduce those rules step by step. And the commodity exchange, where we will hold the auction, will have the necessary conditions. As for the liquefied gas, the auction will take place on the 11th of February, and I've been told that it will be based on market rules with several bidders. And if there is a suspicion of manipulations, we will be changing the Cabinet resolution. Similar amendments to the auction procedures would be introduced into auctions of oil cracking products. Укргазвидобування sells liquefied gas every month with the difference of 6,000 hryvnias per ton. 24 million is the difference monthly. So we should understand the scope and how it will be distributed, etc. As for the oil products that meet Euro 2 requirements, and there are certain limitations for their marketing. Now we want them to be sold only at branded stations of Укргазвидобування, so that they fully understand what quality product they buy at a certain price. On the other hand, they could sell this fuel to the military and to the state-owned enterprises. The Cabinet Ministers, though, addressed it differently, formulated the resolution differently, in different terms. We've looked at the auction procedures, and we are going to hold it. So oil products will also be sold at the auction based on market conditions. And this will be the true auction rather than the lowest price sales, with no artificial reduction of prices. Interfax Ukraine. Could you focus the further developments? NERC decided that Starobyshev and Zuivska heating stations would not be part of the settlement system. Under the contract with Russia, electricity is supplied to the ATO zone. What if those plants would be decommissioned? So what happens? Over the last 4 months, electricity is supplied to the ATO zone for 700 to 800 million hryvnias, and it is not paid for. We did different things to make them pay for it. We consulted Oblenergo's producers and distributors, and it's not only about those two plants, it's about all producers, including alternative ones and heat power complexes, etc. So they are not cut off. They are not disconnected, but they receive no payment, although this money accrues on their accounts. I'm sure that this step will initiate negotiations and will encourage negotiations, because every owner of those plants understands what their prospects are, and they would be encouraging their consumers and local authorities to pay for the consumed electricity. Understand that's a sound process and understandable process. We spoke about barter, for example. So unfortunately, we haven't managed to agree on anything yet. On the other hand, this territory is singled out as a very special territory, and their cuts do not affect our territory. Cut-offs, I mean. And the main electricity lines from Russia are also part of our procedures. And all players are engaged properly. The Customs Service, the Ministry of Finance, ourselves, etc. So there's high probability that we will be able to localize this challenge, and there would be no waste of the money, and the electricity that goes there would not be unpaid. Some MPs say that perhaps IMF would insist on raising tariffs on the 1st of March or the 1st of April. If this is so what this increase would be like? I told you before that we did discuss that with, or we had discussed that with IMF. In April 2014, we signed a memo with IMF undertaking to raise the gas tariffs by 40%. This year, it is also to be raised by 40%. Since the national currency has devalued and we buy gas from other countries for hard currency, if not dollars, then euros. So the hryvnia-denominated gas price has risen. And the cost of production, of Ukrainian production, is not 350 hryvnias per 1,000 cubic meters. This cost is fairly high, and apart from producing it, you have also to transport it, plus VAT that final consumers also pay. And the price should not be 1,100 or 1,300 as it is today. You're speaking about 800s, not taking into account this 350, right? And now you're saying that the population should pay more than 5,000 hryvnias. No, I'm not saying that. The thing I'm saying is that there is understandable cost, and we should not sell it under the cost. We can do that within a very short period of time, but it's been taken place for a long time. And there is no money in the state budget to subsidize gas tariffs. We need the money for defense, for hospitals. I understand that when you speak about those in need, about the least fortunate groups of the population, then they might find it difficult. But the structure of the tariff should be so thought of that it could support the disadvantaged group and not to subsidize the wealthy ones. So don't you generalize. Please don't speak from the place. You are now guessing about the figure, but there is Ministry for Social Policy and Labor. They know the statistics about the income level groups, etc. And there are very good subsidization mechanisms. Nobody believes it in Ukraine because there are problems with obtaining it, the subsidy, I mean. But this can be changed. Content. The Ministry of Social Policy is trying to simplify the procedure as much as possible. Now we are subsidizing everyone, even those who would never ask for it. 1,000 hryvnias per 1,000 cubic meters is very strange. Volodymyr has come to a briefing, and the question was put to the minister, and he is giving the answer. Only then, please ask the questions, okay? Don't interrupt him. Has a decision was adopted about the 1st of March and the 1st of April or not? In principle, there's high probability then that these changes will occur. We understand that a lot of gas is used inefficiently because of the losses and poor infrastructure. On the other hand, we also understand that those changes would not be introduced quickly. We need some time for additional funding. And if we make this step at the end of the heating season, when people understand at least approximately how much this service or the cubic meter of gas would cost, or the heating if they get their heating bills, they will be able to do something. If it is Teplocommunenерго, then they will install meters. If they already have meters, they will insulate their residences, apartments and houses. Yeah. We are fully aware that there are certain groups of the population who will need assistance, and there are very clear mechanisms to do so. Poland, with 36 million of the population and the economy, which is 3 times as large as Ukraine's, consumes 18 billion cubic meters, and Ukraine consumes 43 cubic meters. Germany's economy is 20 times as big, and they only consume 80 billion. So we should analyze the situation, and we should proceed from our resources. Natalka Prutka. You spoke about the price of 1,000 hryvnias. Those who consume 2.5 pay 1,100, and those who consume more pay 18,000. Those who consume more than 6,000 pay even more. Those who consume more than 6,000 make them pay more than 5,000. Yeah, that's exactly what we are talking about. There would be certain cap, for example. And this cap will cover 2/3 of the population. If you consume more, then you will pay more. Now, about the social support by the Ministry of Social Policy. In 2014, according to their statistics, 8 billion hryvnias were allocated in the budget for compensations and subsidies. Only 1 billion was used. Only 7.3% of the families who needed and received subsidies. But in November, the number of people who don't pay has increased. They don't pay because of those limitations. So subsidies do not work. For 93% of the population and 90% of the population below subsistence level. In fact, the complexity of the procedure is not a pretext to change nothing. Now, the Ministry for Social Policy has done a very easy thing, changing the procedures to provide better services and to simplify the process of issuing such subsidies so that people are not tortured in long lines and don't have to collect lots of documents. And my second question, is the Canadian Prime Minister planning to come to Ukraine? Are you going to meet with the Canadian ambassador? I've just come from the meeting with him, with Roman Vasyuk. That's why I've been late. So what are the energy-related plans, particularly nuclear power related plans? You're speaking about reactors, as far as I understand. With the reactors, the situation is fairly difficult because those that we have use current technologies, and we are not planning to decommission them. We will prolong their operation period because we understand the cost of decommissioning. And under the current situation, that's the only possible option. Nuclear energy sector produces more than 30% of our electricity, and it is a very complex mechanism and body, and there are certain technical difficulties here, and the maneuver is very limited. There is no sufficient room for maneuver. Ukrainian consumers consume 50% as little energy as in the peak time. So these fluctuations have to be somehow compensated. And now we speak about the hydro generation and heat generation, and there are certain problems with heat generation for want of coal. And when the heat generation should step in, we don't have the capacities. So this difference was bridged by imported electricity or heat energy. And there are no other options here. There's a lot of discussion about coal, as you will know. We've been criticized that there's a lot of coal, but we do not burn it. As a matter of fact, there are different types of coals. There are specific brands or sorts of coal, gas-based coal or anthracite coal, and different generating facilities use different types of coal, particularly anthracite, a high-quality coal, and the burning technology is totally different from that of the gas-based coal, which burns inflates very rapidly, and the technological chain is totally different. And you cannot take gas-based coal and burn it at the anthracite-based power plant. So the situation is paradoxical. We've got the production of gas-based coals, and there's nowhere to use it. We've got surplus of gas-based coal and a huge deficit of the high-quality coals. They're not mutually substituting. The producer now is reducing its production. The Volodymyr power plant that in that region that was controlled by Ukraine and could use gas-based coal cannot do it anymore because it is under blast, under shelling every day. So apart from asking DTEC management to buy coals from state-owned mines, even though they have sufficient gas-based coal of their own production, is a tough task. We can speak about different administrative or coercive measures, but that's not quite right. As for Canada, we met with them, and they've got lots of ideas about increasing the gas production in this country. And there are many easy solutions, actually. They say we should reduce rent. They say we should open up our markets for competition. Ukrgaz-Dobycza, which in its structure does prospecting and drilling and maintenance, and they never let in any competitors into this segment. They disallow foreigners with their new, more progressive and cheaper technologies to come to the market and prospect those reserves. And that's what I started with. Once we stimulate fair competition, the cost of all those stages will be lower. That's our key task, to demonopolize the market, to encourage competition in it. And as for the atomic energy, we understand what we need to do, and there is a plan reflected in the government's action plan to complete blocks 3 and 4 of Khmelnytska NPP. With the Russians, I don't know. You politicize it extremely. There is a plan, but there's no budget for it. Nothing's going on. Nothing's happening. If we have interesting proposals or offers, we will consider all of them. With Westinghouse, we work to replace Russian uranium, and we are now expecting them to increase their supplies. Every day we analyze the structure of the cost of nuclear fuel, and we try to understand the elements of that structure. Over the last time, the cost of uranium ore has reduced, and as well as some other components of the structure. Ukraine, electricity from Russia, are we planning to reduce the purchases or not? As soon as we produce enough in the country, we will reduce the imports. So far, we haven't got such capacities. Every day, we cut off more than 800 to 1,000 megawatt of electricity. Unless we had that from Russia, we would have had very difficult times. Are you planning to increase it? No, with electricity, you can't store electricity. And that's a very challenging product. It is generated and consumed practically at the same time, instantaneously and simultaneously. So once we can ensure sufficient production in this country, we will give up importing electricity from Russia.
Я вже говорив, що це було досить.
In terms of price, it was a right decision. We buy gas from Russia, we buy coals from Russia, we buy other goods from them, including 12 nuclear fuel, $800 million per year. We pay them in dollars, and nobody is excited because of that. It's a competitive process. Several participants actually fought for this contract, smearing one another, and now they look into the contract and they see that it is totally similar to their own contracts that they suggested concluding, with all the arbitration reservations, etc. I showed it to you. The original contract, and I actually asked for the original contract some time ago. It doesn't differ from what we have now. I didn't sign that contract. I understood its essential conditions, terms and conditions, and I think that the commercial terms and conditions are fairly correct. Moreover, we negotiate this contract all the time. The schedule of supplies is agreed on a daily basis, and we also negotiate the replacement of, or just the revision of, arbitration reservation or arbitration clause. But the contract has been signed, and it is effective, and that's quite a normal situation. Today, at the Cabinet of Ministers session, I explained the conditions under which it was signed. It was on the 29th of December. The auction failed. And before that, several contracts were in force between Ukrenergo that sold to Krimenergo. Krimenergo sold to the Russian company sold to somebody else. And we said that it was not fair, it was not transparent, and the intermediaries do not pay for the product. The entire chain should be different. And it was on the eve of the new year, and the Russians had to sign the contract for January, and they wanted to know who would be supplying electricity in January, because Krimenergo only had the contract that expired in December. They were very aggressive in negotiating. Once you start thinking of that, terms and conditions are fair. All that criticism about those terms and conditions, what was addressed. I provided written explanations to the Prime Minister. 88 million is still due to. That's the arrear. Insider. Electricity imports. how much electricity was imported in January and how much do you plan for February? And now about schedules. You said that the schedules would depend on the needs, on the demand, but we saw maximum consumption over the weekend, from the 23rd to the 25th. I won't disclose all of the commercial secrets, of course. In January, as far as I remember, we imported 380 million. The plans for February, it's harder because we revise the schedule every day. We can buy up to 1 billion kilowatt. But as for the scope of consumption that we are having now, it is unlikely to be more than 500 million. Now the temperatures are dropping. It's snowing now. If Volodymyr stops producing, then the balance will change, you will understand. Will we get enough coal on Ukrainian power plants within the month is a toss-up. So the conditions change every day. So, but you should rest assured that we would not buy unnecessary electricity. We will buy as much as we need. As for that weekend, the price that everyone mentioned, and you saw those figures, the price is formed in a complicated way. There is payment for kilowatts and payment for voltage. And at the weekend, there is no payment for voltage. The cost of electricity at weekday at weekend is about 30% as low. So it is much more profitable to buy it at weekends. That's why they are trying to maximize the consumption. And if I may add, the actual price in January was lower than the one in the contract, the target price, just at the expense or of the use at weekend. One of the Russian officials from Gazprom, or Minister of Energy, said that Ukraine bought Russian gas at 329. No confirmation was heard from the Ukrainian party. Is it the price? Approximately, because we also pay for calories or calorie capacity or intensity, but it's about that, but it can be plus $4 for quality. We pay for calories. And that's the figure for quarter one. As for the second quarter, we are still negotiating the price, and we will intensify the negotiation about the so-called summer package. The second quarter will depend on a number of factors, but in principle, we expect that this price would be even lower. The major volume comes from Europe, and their price is lower because we buy at spot market and because oil prices go down. European spot market was relatively cheaper. So it came from Hungary, Slovakia, partially from Poland. Today we do have advance payment to Russia. Say for 700 billion cubic meters that we can still use. We've used relatively little, from Russian gas, 22 to 25 million cubic meters per day. But now we expect temperatures to drop, so the consumption will grow. But still, we want to keep certain reserve of gas in underground storages for certain technical reasons, etc. Underground gas storages allow us to keep some reserve of gas for colder times. Ukrinform. Last Sunday, when the miners went on strike, they asked questions, and the DTAC representatives said that they were prepared to buy coal at 1,250 hryvnias. Now the state or the government buys 750. But they are ready to sell electricity at 72%. Now this government buys from the Russian Federation at 85 kopecks. So can you comment on those figures? Yep, the devil is in the detail, you know. Coal at 1,100 or 1,200 again is sold only for the certain kind of coal. There's methodology to determine the price. There are mines that do not enrich coal to the necessary quality, with low amount of calories and burning capacity, etc. They might sell at 700 hryvnias. That's just usual coal, crude coal, non-enriched coal. But in the enrichment process, up to 25% of the same volume of gas is filtered. So it's a commercial approach. If you produce low-quality coal, they spoke about the same coal. I doubt that. I doubt that. I'm trying to illustrate logic to you. I don't know. I wasn't present there, and I don't quite understand it. I'm not sure. First of all, you have to take into account quality of coals which affect the price. As for the electricity, the tariff is calculated as the residue methodology. There is a market price 98 kopecks. All the electricity that is generated by all producers is assessed based on this price. Then Energoatom will get its coal, its money at 32 kopecks, etc. But there are also heat and electricity stations that produce not only electricity but heat energy, and their price is 145 hryvnias. They burn gas, and they have lots of inefficiencies, and we've got a lot of questions to them. We are trying to stimulate the renovation of their fixed assets, etc. So some parts of the pie go to different generators, and what is left is heat generation that then distributes the residue. So everyone but heat generators have very clear tariffs. NERC understands the structure of costs, and they detailize it fairly well. In the case of heat energy, it does not happen. So when in wintertime, heat and electricity stations produce electricity and heat, they generate more of expensive electricity. There's also an alternative energy supplies up to 5% of alternative power supplies. So the situation with pricing is more sophisticated and complicated, if you wish. And subsidies also affect the entire situation. Those subsidies amount to the difference of money not paid by oblenergos. So every month, the amount of those subsidies is revised. In the previous months, it was 89 kopecks. In January, it was 89. In January, it was 86 kopecks. And our expectations or forecasts for February are different. It will depend on the proportion of shares of generation by different facilities, and we will see the general result, which depends on different factors. And now DTEK says it will be 72 kopecks. Okay, we'll live and see. On the other hand, we are now speaking about just 1 month, resulting from different factors. For example, in March, the tariff would be 91 kopek from the same estimated model, which might not be the actual picture. In December, they received money to purchase coals, 1.6 billion, which is quite a large amount to form certain reserves for a certain period of time. So oftentimes people take things or statistics from the context and present them as a very important step. If we look at a quarter or the whole year ahead of us, the average tariff would be higher than their cost. And there are a lot of questions with the cost. You will understand that the major part of the cost is made by fuel. DTAC produces all of its coal at their own mines, and they never report the cost of those coals. They don't reveal it either to us or to the regulator. They invested a lot into the efficiency. I do agree with you. And through economies of scale and good investment, they've achieved a lot. They reinvested into those mines, inter alia by selling coal, but their cost is higher than the market price. So the major part of profit is made in that different sector or segment. And we should actually calculate rate of return that is necessary to develop the coal segment, generation, distribution. We understand that very well. But at the same time, I understand why are you buying at a higher price if there is offer at a lower price. We buy at a higher price to keep this light going. Once they address it, we will establish the price. The situation with imports is different, difficult and complicated, because it's about competition, interfax. My question is of more strategic nature. Last summer, Proden said that you were going to transfer the boilers and Pilska from A coals to G coals. The Japanese are coming, we invite them, and as well as Poles, and we negotiate with all of them, trying to assess expectations and opportunities. Sometimes there are certain investment commitments that they want us to undertake. There are certain expectations on ROI, and that requires analysis and feasibility studies. But those units that use high quality A coals can be transferred to G coals by reconstructing boilers, and we should do that. We should think strategically. Reconstruction should be carried out anyway to improve the cost intensity, etc. Moreover, there is an easier method, simpler method, which is challenging at the same time. There are several options to burn G coals at A coal-based boilers, and specialized research institute is now looking into it. You can mix two types of coals to control the volatility and the explosive power of coals, and use G coals. The cost of reconstruction, cash flows, the Japanese are ready to provide grants. Poles are ready to lend to us. And there's also huge Chinese loan, $3 billion, and we reanimated this idea. We met with the ambassador. So this work is underway. And a team is being now collected to go to China for negotiations. So we are now thinking when to go there, but it's going on. Do you see the time frames? Yeah, it would be prior to the beginning of the next heating season. We'll do what we can. In fact, it's enough to transfer just part of the blocks. Of course, we will have certain problems with logistics, because those two types of coals should be kept separately. But I suppose we would be moving step by step. This would be a phased process. But Tripilla station is, or power plant, is a large plant, and the coals could be supplied from the west and from the east. And the Japanese offer a certain money, grant money, and I believe that this is a promising effort. How much will it cost? Unfortunately, it's very costly. It's expensive. Several $1 million per unit. In order to build a new 200 megawatt unit, you'll need to spend 200 million. Reconstruction could cost 35 million. which is much less than a new construction, but it's not very cheap. Another question from the insider. $1 million, right, $1 million. A new unified market has been elected. The proportion has changed in terms of different generation facilities. What do you think of this new composition? Will you be comfortable in cooperating with them? As I said before, I am all in favor of competition, and I believe that this organization should bring together different types of participants to discuss matters. The proportion, the combination has changed. In the previous version, DTEC had 3 participants in one subgroup amongst distributors, electricity distributors, and by not turning up, they could block the session, right, and block operations. And they negotiated all those matters. They seemed to be in agreement. The number of members hasn't changed, but the composition has, and the redistribution among subsectors, subgroups has changed. They were supposed to elect the head earlier today, but they postponed the meeting till tomorrow. And that's a good signal that a discussion is underway, negotiations are underway. It takes time, it takes effort, but that's life. And that's a positive development. And you could see that there are representatives of heat and electricity stations, and these are the new participants. In fact, we suggest changing the composition dramatically. At the session yesterday, Mr. Svitalik presented this idea that the selection should be based on functional principle, because alternative generating generation representatives could come up with interesting ideas. So we should extend the functionalities. So one group should not have 4 votes there, if you come to think of it. It's an advisory body, and it will be totally transformed, and the concept underlying it will change by 2018. Thank you very much. Any more questions, comments? Bloomberg? No questions? Good. Thank you very much. Oh, one very brief question. Did DTEC agree to buy a part of the coal produced by state-owned mines? This is a question, as far as I know, and a deputy of mine is in charge of this matter. As far as I know, they haven't signed any contract, but in principle, they've come to an agreement that they will. They will buy at least 100,000 tons per month. Or let me see. What about the price? I'm not sure. There's no contract. So I expect it to be the market price. Given the quality of the coal, it should be 1,150 hryvnias. Oftentimes, they discuss some nominal price that is used for calculations and for settlements with certain quality characteristics. But in every separate case, every mine should know what they get. And that depends on the type of coals, enriched or non-enriched, A grade, G grade, D grade, G grade, and they have different prices. and they have different consumers. So on the average, the actual price should be about 1,150 hryvnias. Next week, I'll tell you more. Wigila Ukraine is purchasing that coal, and the difference is 20 hryvnias. 20 hryvnias stays with Wigila Ukraine to cover overheads. So that's the mechanism that they've agreed on. Then Wigila Ukraine works as an intermediary. If a mine produced less coal than necessary, then the Wigila Ukraine company would compensate it for the salaries. So they redistribute certain amounts of money. And the very last question now. On the 2nd of February, the Commission was supposed to complete its activities. Will state-owned mines get subsidies? It's not only the decision of the Cabinet Ministers, but of Parliament as well. Whether it will allocate the money or not, they will have to reflect it in the budget. Given the current situation, I understand that for a certain period of time, this support is necessary. Why? I understand subsidization of coal production is ripped with corruption and abuse, but today, 52,000 people produce 6 million tons of coal, although the normal proportion should be 1:1. So we will have to optimize the number of people. There are some mines that are loss-making. As I said, we should not support them. We should close them down. But decommissioning decisions are very tough. We will have to pay salaries to the workers anyway, and we will have certain losses. And this is not provided for by the state budget. Before they go into the category of those undergoing liquidation, they will have to get the money for the sales of coal. So now we are speaking about direct costs of electricity, salaries, etc., 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 and we need to close them down very soon. And I'm sure that we need to address this issue as soon as possible. We should advance every month so that the situation changes monthly. We start today, we liquidate one mine, and tomorrow it will spare us costs and expenses. Because the cost of production is now about 1,500 hryvnias. By the end of the year, it should be 1,300. So I expect that within the year, these mines will at least make even or break even. There are a lot of factors contributing to it. For example, such an unexpected situation as today. We expected to sell 300,000 per month, but there is no marketing today, no selling. And we will need or they will need the support because they don't sell today. They can't sell today, and this is a challenge. Thank you, dear colleagues. I will be glad to meet with you at the weekend to answer your questions and to discuss matters. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. We hope you have got fewer questions now about what is going on in the energy sector. There are a lot of areas, and there are developments every day in dozens of such areas. I meet with at least 10 people or delegations that change the understanding of the industry, and they adjust our plans in almost every area of our activities. The situation is very volatile. Thank you. Thank you very much.